7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You'll never have the sacred stone.
Welcome into the Vegas Squares podcast. Today is Saturday. We are looking at the divisional round of the playoffs. It is getting into the nitty-gritty. We've got 8 teams left. We've got lots of exciting matchups this weekend, lots of exciting storylines. We're going to try and kind of break down what we think is going to happen and give our picks. This is what are we calling our playoff prop bet? Playoff prop bet?
Yeah, I can't think of anything clever for it right off the cuff. So, yeah, playoff prop bet.
All right, well, you've heard Spike on mic 1. This is the Vegas Squares podcast. We are back in studio giving our picks for the divisional round. Spike on mic 1 is present. Token Tony, once again, not present, so he'll be using a proxy again. What are we calling him this week? Still just fake proxy Token Tony? Fake Tony Broken. I got another. Broken Tony?
Broken Tony, there we go. All right, Broken Tony, you're
Broken
up.
Tony. What's up, Tony Johnson?
Things are good. Looking forward to hopefully another 7-1 week for Big Token here.
Boo!
Yeah, speaking of like a 7-1 week, I feel like, we talked about proxy services a little bit on one of the podcasts and how, if you don't live in Vegas, they're clearly, beneficial for you not having to fly to Vegas every weekend and stand in line for the crowds. But I'm almost wondering if, because you talked about, I asked Kelly in Vegas on Twitter how much she costs, how much her proxy service costs.
Easy.
let me clarify that. How much the proxy service costs. And she said $300. I think she said $300 for the 17 weeks, which averaged out, I think we said like to $18 a week. But I feel like a proxy service, I wonder if there are any proxy services out there that kind of charge based on your success. I know that the Westgate competition is obviously a little bit more of a long shot, but obviously no one would say this, but there are people, I'm assuming there are people that are still betting for big bettors outside of Nevada.
For sure, yeah, for regular type of bets, not just for the contest.
Right.
Yeah, almost like a bet runner kind of thing.
Like a Billy Walters style, because he was big into that stuff. Obviously he got busted for a lot of those different things, but I'm sure there's still people who slam down sizable wagers that probably use a person in here, and if you read the 2+2 forums, I think a couple of people are actually outing themselves. I got a little bored the other night at work and was reading about a guy who does it for another guy, and basically everybody on the forum was telling him, everybody on the forum was telling him, dude, shut the fuck up. Like, you don't need to be making this public knowledge because all it does is it's going to get you arrested.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. It doesn't really, affect, I guess, our individual, betting lives too much. I just don't really understand.
Well, we don't need proxies. We live here.
Right, exactly.
But I'm just saying, like a person who wants to be wagering 5-6-figure units and doesn't want to live in Vegas is going to want a proxy. Obviously, as sports betting nationwide becomes more and more regular in the States, that'll probably fall by the wayside.
For sure.
But now you may have actual proxies everywhere, because there are going to be some states in this country that will not adopt sports betting.
For sure. So I think it'll be more of a normal type of deal, not just as we've seen here in Nevada for decades now, but certainly will be, and we'll see how the states handle it and how they crack down. There's a lot of books here that won't accept wagers from maybe certain people or what have you, so they try to use somebody else, whether it's a proxy or not, or whether they live here or not, and sometimes that can also bring a hairy issue as well, because the books know that this person is really not actually making a 6-figure bet; they're doing it for somebody else. So it's always a kind of a tough process.
Yeah, I wonder. I'm sure that that obviously probably the uppers in the books are specially trained to kind of seek that stuff out, and just how you can kind of conduct yourself when you go to the book to not make yourself look like one of those people. It'd be an interesting. Because you have to provide your personal information. I think once you reach a certain amount won or amount wagered.
Right.
So.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I don't know enough about that. So.
And sportsbooks now, a lot of the people on the forum were talking about living off the comps, and I'm like, sportsbooks now don't really offer too much in the way of comps, unless you're betting in the 6 figures, which is I wouldn't say rare, but it's a little less common today than it was a while ago.
If somebody is going to be wagering six figures on a game, I would imagine that they would be flying to Vegas to make that wager in person because they would want to scoop up those comps for themselves.
Sure.
Plus, they could probably afford it. If they're willing to throw away six figures on a game as a bet, they can afford a flight to Vegas.
Well, I mean, what was I forget Billy Walters' proxy's name, but when Billy Walters lived in Texas, I mean, he was throwing six figures. Again, this was, I think, 70s, 80s, but I mean, he never came around, and the guy wrote a book about how he lived the sweet life, with the comps and the free stuff and that all the casinos gave him, and just for betting for Billy Walters. So I mean, you never quite know. You never know what anybody's individual story is. There was one of a guy. He actually ended up being anonymous. He had a wife and kids and everything, and he sent a proxy. I think it was his cousin or something to bet for him big, and he could never go out to Vegas because how was he going to explain to his wife and kids that I'm just I'm on a work trip for the couple of days for whatever it was. But there's always different stories, different strokes. But I always found that kind of interesting, how you can keep up, betting large amounts for somebody and keep it under the radar, and eventually we all get caught. When I say we, I don't mean myself, but eventually they all get caught.
Yeah, you'll get caught eventually too.
Me too. Yeah. Shh. Anyways, so, now that we've bored you, and I know you're waiting on bated knee for our picks, we're actually going to, before we get into them, because I know that everybody's kind of waiting to see how we're going to fuck this up and let Token just crush us.
Yeah, probably.
Let's kind of take a look. We talked about it in the last podcast, but there have actually been some hirings since then. Let's kind of take a look around the coaching carousel of what has happened in the NFL the last few days. We know... what are we going about? Not Broken Tone. I was going to say Broken Tone. We know Tony Johnson's opinion. We know my opinion. I kind of wanted to get your opinion on some of these hirings. The first one being obviously the AFC East. Adam Gase is staying in there, but going to New York to coach the Jets. Initial thoughts are a lot of people really like this move, but you can obviously have a kind of a sense of questioning because the quarterback whisperer couldn't make it work with Tannehill. Now he's got to go to a guy with even less of a experience in the league now with Sam Darnold, even though many believe that Sam Darnold's probably a better quarterback than Ryan Tannehill. But what are your initial thoughts on the Jets basically taking the Dolphins' retreads and hiring Adam Gase?
Initially I heard this and I said, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Why would the Jets take somebody that's failed? But then I realized it's the Jets. But then the more I looked at it, the more I realized it made sense, because you're right. Gase, the quarterback whisperer, didn't have the luck that he should have with Tannehill and what's his name? I already forgot.
Jay Cutler?
The quarterback for the Jets now.
Oh, Osweiler? The Jets. No, Darnold. I was thinking Dolphins on it, yeah.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
And you're right that Darnold is probably, he doesn't have the pedigree that Tannehill does, but that means he also has fewer NFL games and fewer bullshit to wash out of his head for Gase to take over and input his game plan and input his knowledge into Darnold's head. So I think this is actually going to make Darnold a much better quarterback. I expect, and he looked pretty good, especially towards the end of the year for the Jets as well. So I think this is probably about as good as the Jets were going to get. Obviously, aside from somebody hiring Josh McDaniels, which would have been my dream come true. But
well, the thing is if you look at it, which is, I mean, if you're having to find a positive with Adam Gase, is actually when Ryan Tannehill was the quarterback. So take out Brock Osweiler, take out Jay Cutler. The Dolphins actually were above 500, which I know is a line of mediocrity, but still, I mean, to be above 500 when you have your starting franchise quarterback in, usually will keep your job in most scenarios. And they made the playoffs one out of 1 year with a full Tannehill, because second year was all Cutler when he tore the ACL, and third year was a combination of Tannehill and Brock Lobster.
I agree. No, yeah, I echo the same sentiment. I think the regard of Adam Gase is certainly very high, as it should be, and he's one of those young offensive minds that has seemed to have found success even when things get bleak. And some of these other quarterbacks and the retreads, there were some positive games here, even from Lobster, as you discussed. He really wasn't that bad, in a small chunk of games this year, which is, I think, saying something because he hasn't really played all that well since those few.
I think they went 8-8, correct?
Yeah.
I think 8-8, which is kind of actually the Dolphins' model for success.
Yeah.
The last decade or so.
I was pretty impressed with the
their
job
playoff
overall in Miami. I'm one of those that I'm surprised they fired him, number one, and two, I thought he actually did a pretty above-average job over there. So this one makes a ton of sense to me, although I thought it was going to be Matt Rule, to be honest with you, coach out of Baylor, who has now taken two teams that were on an essential disaster. He inherited a Temple team 6 or 7 years ago that was just out of the MAC and was basically dead. And they went from 2 wins the previous year to 10 within 2 seasons. And then this Baylor job that nobody really seemed to want, he's really able to put together a nice group there. And Baylor sort of turned things around. And he's a guy that seems to work really, really well with people, and he understands organization well. That's probably his number one attribute, which would make a lot of sense at the NFL level. But
there's still one opening. You never know.
Yeah, you never know. And it was said, I guess, from the GM that he wasn't going to be able to put all of his own staff together, from what I understand. So that was why Matt Rule himself actually took himself out of.
You can say it. You can use the pun.
I'm not. You're the pun guy.
He ruled himself out.
You can do it. So.
You look at it kind of with. I mean, we've come to expect the Patriots for going on 19, 20 years now. At some point, you do have to kind of think about, okay, Adam Gase or whoever the Dolphins decide to get, or whoever, if McDermott's not the guy, somebody is going to be the next coach that kind of controls this division. And it may be the next guy who goes to the Patriots. You don't know, but we've seen 20 years with, 17, or let's say it's 19 years, right? 2000 is when Bill Belichick got hired. So effectively not 19 yet, but so 18 years.
Right.
And Bill Belichick has lost, 3 division titles?
Yeah, he went 5-11 his first year with Bledsoe.
They missed the playoffs after one of their Super Bowls.
They missed it after 2002, and then they missed it when Brady went down and Castle came in 2008. Although, to be fair, they went 11-5 or 10-6 that year.
11-5, yeah.
And then they got screwed out of the playoffs because of wild card standings, and then the 8-8 Chargers winning the AFC West managed to get the number 4 seed.
Yeah, that's going to happen. I mean, we can debate the whole, who should be in, winning divisions. We can debate that on another podcast.
Well, and the reason I bring that up is because so many people were pissed that the Chargers with additional or identical or better record than the Patriots are on the road going to Foxborough this week, and people are like, "Oh, how can the NFL do this?" It's like none of you motherfuckers were complaining in 08 when the
prisoners
roles
of the
were
moment.
reversed.
Yeah. Well, no, a lot of people forget that Marshawn Lynch run, the big when he became beast mode. That was a 7-9 Seahawks team.
Right.
Defeated. It was a division champion that hosted the defending Super Bowl champion Saints that year and beat them. Things happen.
Yeah.
I think 1 year the NFC South. I think the Panthers went in with a losing record as well.
It's a total joke.
Or 7-8-1.
They were 7-8-1,
Yeah.
and they won a playoff game against the Cardinals. I mean,
yeah, it's a bizarre league. But I just want to touch back very quickly before we move on to the other teams. You were talking about the Dolphins and their going 8-8 as a measure of success. I actually just looked. We had 17 teams this year finish under 500 in the NFL. So going 8-8 puts you. It should be at average, but theoretically you are above average
this year,
yeah. Winning half your games, and that's going to put butts in the seats, especially for teams that are going 3-13, 4-12 every year. If all of a sudden you're at 8-8, people are going to be revitalized. They're going to be buying the jerseys, they're going to be buying the tickets, buying the hot dogs, paying for parking, and that's what the ownership wants to see. Even if they're not hitting the playoffs right away, as long as they're getting the revenue, and as long as they're putting butts in seats, the owner's not going to care.
Well, especially, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't they start 4-1 or 4-2 this year as well? I mean, they started off hot. I mean, you called them the most fraudulent. The 5-1 team or whatever they started off as.
At 3-0, I said they were the worst 3-0 team in NFL history.
3-0, okay. Yeah, so it's just at some point, one of these other 3 teams, not named New England Patriots, have to get it right. I mean, you would think
eventually.
Yeah,
it's hard to get it right in the NFL though because the quarterback position is so tough, and finding good, talented, long-lasting guys that can lead a team to victory year in and year out are so rare. They just don't exist anymore.
Who's the most successful coach not named Belichick in the AFC East over the last 20 years? Rex Ryan?
Oh,
I mean, you're not. It's not, the 2 straight AFC championships has to be the most success out of any of the 3 teams. I mean, the Bills made the playoffs once, and the Jets, I think, have made it 3 times. They beat the Patriots 1 time on their way to the AFC championship. So I think the most successful coach not named Bill Belichick in the AFC East has to be Rex Ryan. And
I think you're right.
That's not saying much.
Yeah.
So. All right, how about the Browns? We talked about Freddie Kitchens because he was already hired at the time we did the last podcast, and we're not loving the hire, but at the same time, I think this has to play out a little bit because the question now for Cleveland Browns or for non-Cleveland Browns fans or for people who watch the NFL is, what are Cleveland Browns fans' expectations now going forward? Because I mean, from 0-16 to what were they, 7-8-1? Whatever they
finished with, yeah.
They were somewhere around 500.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think Browns fans want to get ahead of themselves, but at the same time, I don't think they can help themselves with Baker Mayfield. I think they emulate the cockiness of their quarterback. I haven't seen this firsthand because I don't know too many walk-in Browns fans in my personal life. So, but I got to imagine the city of Cleveland's got a little strut going to them this year. But I mean, Tony talked about, let's pump the brakes on that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I can concur from what was previous said, and the second thing I think that you brought up or touched on briefly was I think Cleveland sees this as sort of their time. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of turmoil in Pittsburgh, which we'll get to in a little bit.
Yeah.
And and Baltimore had a nice finish and certainly a nice season, but they do certainly look like they are a fallible team, with a developing quarterback and one without seemingly much of an arm at this juncture. But I think Cleveland fans, and I only know one personally, they certainly do seem to feel like this is their time. And whoever they were to hire, I think they feel like they're ready to take the next step and become a playoff caliber team and a division winning team right away. I don't think there's any time to waste, at least in that mind.
Yeah, and one of the things that I read about, because this is because I don't know too much about Freddie Kitchens and his work history, but I do know a little bit about the Browns' toxic environment. What I understand is that under Hugh Jackson, he would report directly to the owner and kind of bypass the general manager. And then the general manager reported to some executive vice president, whatever the fuck his title was. So essentially there were just 2 factions in the Cleveland.
This has to be pre-John Dorsey, I would imagine, right?
This was under John Dorsey. John Dorsey and the executive VP were on one side, and then Hugh Jackson reporting to the owner were kind of on the other, and then people would kind of fall into the different camps. But now, the way I understand this is that Kitchens knows he reports to Dorsey, and that goes up the ladder. So they are now in lockstep.
Instilling a sense of stability.
Right.
Installing a sense of stability.
So getting that front office cohesion and unity, and I hate using corporate buzz speak like that, but...
Connectitude.
Synergy.
Yes, synergy. Yes, the synergy of the Cleveland Synergy. They're actually changing their name in the offseason. I'm breaking that.
Cleveland Synergies.
This is. I think this is going to be the recipe for a happy, healthy environment to get more out of Baker Mayfield. And I think that was a necessary step. Whoever Cleveland was going to hire, this needed to be done, to have that new structure in place, to have that really rigid hierarchy that they could go out and say, this is what is going to happen, like it or don't work here.
And that's the thing so far, Tony, is Dorsey's hit a home run with everything so far. I mean, Denzel Ward is looking like he could be Defensive Player of the Year. Baker Mayfield's probably the runaway candidate for Rookie of the Year. This would be the first real decision or move that could backfire, and it may not. I mean, so far, like I said, I think Dorsey's batting 1,000.
So far, yes, and he didn't hire Hugh Jackson, obviously. So
right, yeah, he got rid of Hugh Jackson, and since Hugh Jackson left, the culture and the product on the field got better.
Yeah. No, my only thought is it's tough. While I do respect the work that Dorsey has done, especially from his time with the Chiefs as well, when upper management for the Browns has been abysmal for decades now, and it's still tough to wrap my head around the fact that will be a cohesive unit. I realize that it certainly has the potential to be now, but it's a I'll believe it when I see it kind of deal. And
sure, absolutely. I mean, like I said, this is kind of a situation where Jimmy G came to the 49ers, and all of a sudden they were a 9-win team in Vegas.
Right.
And again, he got hurt, but they were like all of a sudden ready to, Baker Mayfield still, in my opinion, has a lot of work to do. As much as I'm a fan of his,
definitely,
still, he's far from a finished product.
Sure. Yeah, lots of work. I mean, and we'll see what happens through this draft and in the off season. And there's still a lot to be said for going forward, at least into the next season. But certainly these are positive moves here. I'm concerned, as we talked about before, about Freddie Kitchens being only a coordinator for half of a season, and a position coach before that, and now a head coach is just, with a lot of these expectations, it to me seems like too much, too quickly. But again, not knowing him, and none of us, really, I would say, when I say us, I mean pretty much everyone. We don't really know what he's made of necessarily, and maybe he doesn't either. So we'll see if we've seen situations like this before where guys really mold into the position well, and others don't. So I think there'll be time will tell.
And speaking of mold, we talk about Freddie Kitchens. He seems to fit the mold of what the hot, trendy, sexy pick is right now. The guy who can basically become one with your quarterback and make that situation great. Well, there's 52 other guys and the rest of the staff that you cannot alienate. And you and I talked about that on the last podcast.
Exactly.
How is he going? I'm not worried about his relationship with Baker Mayfield or how he can call plays. I'm worried about the fact that he has to be a coach to 52 other guys as well. And that's probably going to be the sentiment for a couple of the coaches we talk about. But I mean, we talked about in the last podcast, Tony and I, but Spike, I mean, that seems to be the trend. The next Sean McVay. I don't know how Sean McVay is really working. I don't follow the Rams too closely, but how is Sean McVay's relationship with the other 52 guys, and how is that going to be a problem or a drawback or a benefit to like the other guys that are hired that are these quarterback or offensive minded quote unquote geniuses?
Well, I think with Sean McVay, he has done so well in Los Angeles handling not only the quarterback but the personalities on that team. And that was the one thing that we talked about this offseason that I was really concerned about because he was such a young guy.
Talib, Sue.
Exactly. So being able to keep those guys in check in a winning environment and kind of keeping everybody in line and kind of with the message of the team, I think is a great accomplishment for somebody as young as McVay. So this is a trial by fire for Kitchens. He's got to go in, and he has to know that he can't just talk to Baker Mayfield. Like, they're not the cool girls at the cliquey popular table in high school.
Can't sit with us.
Right, exactly. They need to include everybody. He has to know everybody, and while he can have kind of a better or special relationship, not like a priest to an altar boy, but like a special relationship with Baker Mayfield.
That came out of nowhere.
Nice.
That as long as he has that kind of relationship with this quarterback, I think that the rest of the team will see that the relationship that they have, if that produces winning, then I think everything else is going to be fine. So he may just...
And that's a key right there, is the winning.
And he may end up just kind of lucking himself into a winning environment and getting the team to play better behind him. And if everybody's buying in because of that, then everything's just kind of gel together.
Well, especially if you got quarterback and running back on rookie deals. I think they've got a little bit of money to spend as well. Freddie Kitchen might luck himself into a good 3 or 4 year run here where they're, a couple of maybe a playoff appearance or two. But, you talk about that kind of that winning. It's the other question is Baker Mayfield's quote unquote swag or his demeanor going to get old if they're not winning? Kind of things like that. But all right, well, let's flip. Let's actually talk about a defensive guy. And Vic Fangio is filled by the Broncos. They tapped him as the next coach. I think he's 62 years old and getting his first head coaching job, which Tony alluded to the fact that I wonder what the reason is the reason the guy's 62 years old and just getting his first coaching job. Is there more to that story, or is it just simply he just felt now of all times was the right time? But nevertheless, Vic Fangio is going to come in. We know what he did with the Bears last year. They're they were a great defense. They were number one in a lot of statistical categories. But now he has to come into the Denver Broncos, where I don't know if the defense is necessarily the huge red flag here. It's more so, well, Tony's favorite player, Case Keenum.
Yes, that is my favorite.
And this is kind of weird for me because, when we see hires like this, if a team is hiring a defensive guy, that means that they feel that they have defensive weapons that can be utilized better, but that the offense is fine. Like, that's the way I've always kind of pictured
Vance
it.
Joseph was a defensive guy.
Yeah.
Vance Joseph was a defensive coordinator in
Buffalo.
Miami?
Or no, Miami.
Was it Miami or Buffalo? Oh, he was
in Buffalo, and then he was the coordinator in Miami.
He was.
Okay, that's right.
I was going to say maybe you're
position
right.
coach. No, position coach too. You're right.
Well, he's a defensive guy.
Yes.
Case in point. So
I'm not saying the logic makes sense.
no. I'm not trying to debunk your argument. I'm just saying it just seems weird because usually what happens when you fire a defensive guy, you go offense and vice versa. So we went straight defense to defense.
Right, but what this is telling me is that John Elway is happy with Case Keenum, he's happy with the rest of the offense, and he feels that the defense needs such an improvement that they have to bring in a new voice for the defensive side of the ball.
And that was my question: is the voice, the leadership, a lot of the things that were said around the Denver area, or even you can read them wherever, but that Vance Joseph's ability to coach a game and ability to lead a team after 2 years never showed up.
Right.
His decisions in game, and also a lot of the situations. Even Von Miller, I think his mom came out on Instagram and just spilled the beans, which when mom comes out and says some things that only she could know because her son said something, that's where the problems start to lie. But I mean, you can make Vance Joseph, you can make not Adam Gase. Who was the last guy to get fired there before Vance Joseph? Was that John Fox?
It would have
in Denver?
Yes.
Yeah. You can make John Fox, you can make Vance Joseph, you can make Vic Fangio the scapegoat, but eventually I think you got to look at the guy sitting up in the press box, and maybe he's a better player than he was a general manager.
Yeah, and I think that might come around in the end, but
I know Bolins love him. The wife Bolin.
He's still riding the Peyton Manning Super Bowl win, and he will for another few years until the people in Denver get restless.
Until they tell him to just go to a different front office job.
Yeah.
Exactly.
He'll take. I think he's got a handful of car dealerships and shit. And Elway.
Well, he's well entrenched.
Yeah. Aside from the money,
he'll
he made
always
in the
be
league,
loved. I'm just saying
he's fine.
I'm not worried about his legacy, so to speak. I'm just more worried about if you're a Bronco fan, John Elway isn't suiting up anymore, so if he's not helping the team, it's time to get rid of him. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
That kind of situation. So, all right, we also have who else? We have the Cardinals, who hired Cliff Kingsbury.
Yes.
And it sounds like you're ready. You're already ready for this. So go
All
ahead.
right. So, remind me again, because Kingsbury or whatever his name is, came out and said that he would, if he had the opportunity to draft this player number one, he would. Who was that player?
Kyler Murray.
Okay. So he's a quarterback, correct? This is how little I watch college football.
He's a dual threat quarterback.
Dual threat quarterback out of Oklahoma. So this is what the latest gossip is in New England. Now that
Rosen to New
England for a third round pick, because New England has about 17 of them this draft, and let him develop under Brady, so that way Rosen doesn't get wasted and his career ruined while he's waiting for a job as a backup.
I mean, sure, why not? They've done this for 15 years under Brady. Ryan Mallett, you had Brian Hoyer, you've had Jimmy Garoppolo, you've had Jacoby Brissett. Why not Josh Rosen at this point?
Yeah,
but this is the actual time where mortality is starting to set in, so you actually probably need something in the cupboard, unless Bill Belichick's just determined when he's done, he's going to make sure that the whole thing is blown up as a big middle finger to Bob Kraft.
That would be wonderful. But the question is going to be... Yeah, why not? I don't give a shit. The question is going to be, would Kingsbury be willing to make that kind of a deal? If he knows that he's not going to use Rosen, would he be willing to give him up for other draft picks?
He would have,
or does he want that insurance policy?
He would have to convince the front office and everybody in it to draft Kyler Murray and make that trade. I don't think he has full creative control in that spot. And even then, it's easy to say something, what was that, 2 or 3, a year or two ago, and then actually to have it come to fruition. I don't think, if they don't draft Kyler Murray number 1, I don't think anybody's going to be like, how dare you, this man's a liar.
Right.
So, it's a tough one. But at the same time, I mean, the Cardinals GM, I forget his name, I think his name is like Steve Keim. He's already. You could argue that he's already taken one chance this offseason by hiring Kingsbury. So why not draft Kyler Murray and maybe implement Token Tony's 2-quarterback offense?
Oh, there we go. I like
that. Would make more sense in a 2-quarterback offense than Token Tony's version of Alex Smith and Kirk Cousins.
Right, after Cousins had already left.
He wasn't gone. He was a free agent, but he hadn't signed anywhere yet. They were.
I thought he had already signed in Minnesota when he was talking about that.
I don't know. Who knows?
Well, whatever.
The timeline's cloudy.
Whatever it was a stupid idea, Token. And if you're listening, stop talking.
If you're listening, you should be in bed by now. But no, I mean, like I said, Steve Keim's already taken one chance hiring Cliff Kingsbury. They already came out and said Steve Wilkes was a complete disaster because it wasn't necessarily his coaching or I guess what they basically came out and said is when we were a healthy team, we were getting our doors blown in, and from week to week, he never seemed to be able to get a message through to the players. So I guess we're going to go with the hot trendy thing with Cliff Kingsbury. I know that, we've said the same. You could say the same thing for all these guys that are the quarterback gurus. And again, the one in Green Bay as well, we'll talk about. They have to be able to manage the other 52 guys as well. And I'm not knocking them already. It's just the book will be out on it.
That's the big key to this one. And unfortunately, like with some of the previous ones we've talked about, Cliff has absolutely no experience really here doing any of this.
He hasn't even experience being a winning head coach.
Yeah, he really didn't win all that much. He was only 35-40 at Texas Tech, although, there are a couple of caveats to that. I think the main one, I think this is the biggest thing that happened, was that he coached Pat Mahomes, and he pretty much chose Pat Mahomes over Baker Mayfield when it came down to who would be the quarterback for that Texas Tech team 2 or 3 years ago. So I think that was the big key there, is nobody really thought that was the choice that made the most sense. And then looking back on it, Mahomes was a very, very good player at Texas Tech. He did not get the credit he deserved just because of they didn't have a great defense at that point still yet, and Mayfield was playing so well in Oklahoma in a much better situation.
But couldn't you have gotten? I know he was the OC at USC, so. There's maybe a little bit more of a chance you don't, but couldn't you have been the Arizona Cardinals and said, "Hey, look, we'd like you to be our offensive coordinator," and maybe I'm not in the front office, so I don't know. It just seems Steve Wilkes got a raw deal, but at the same time, I get at least agree. The reasoning for what they gave, I can understand. But that's what you get when you bring in Sam Bradford and then draft a rookie quarterback. What did you expect? You knew that you were going to take your lumps. The year before with Carson Palmer and Bruce Arians, they were 8-8. So I get that you wanted to somewhat emulate 8-8, but with no Carson Palmer, no Bruce Arians, Sam Bradford and Josh Rosen, what did you expect? 5-11? So, okay, you were 3-13. A couple bounces didn't go your way. You beat the Packers in Lambeau. That's pretty fucking good. I don't care if
they played hard up until about week 15 or 16. They actually played really hard. And they almost beat Kansas City too on the road as well.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, so I'm saying they're telling me that the message wasn't getting across. It seemed like Steve Wilkes was doing okay.
I liked him a lot. As a head coach. I thought he.
I didn't have an opinion one way or the other, but it takes a lot in the NFL or in any job for you to get fired after 1 year. It has to be a complete disaster, and I didn't think, despite the record, that was the case in Arizona.
I agree completely. Yeah, Pat Shurmur got fired after a year in Cleveland in a complete disastrous situation that was really not his fault. Mm-hmm. Again, a lot of players got injured, and there was a lot of front office issues, and he inherited a team that was a complete joke. There's nothing.
That's what I'm saying. I don't know what the contract situation for Wilkes is, but now you're paying Wilkes, you're paying Kingsbury, when I really believe you could have kept Wilkes on. And actually, I think you could have brought Kingsbury in as an offensive coordinator, and maybe 1 or 2 years down the line, if it didn't work, but your offense was actually improving, you could bring in Kingsbury at that point.
I think you're exactly right. I think that.
Whoa!
I know, and I hate saying it. I hate saying it. I know this is going to end up being a sound clip if you ever get one of those fancy fuck boards where you can.
It'll be in our intro till the end of time.
God.
You're exactly right.
It's just it's problematic when you bring in a guy, you give him a year, and then you fire him just because things didn't go exactly as planned. Like I think when we were talking earlier about that coach having the special relationship with the quarterback and ignoring the other 52 guys, it didn't seem like that was the case in Arizona.
And he was a defensive guy too.
Yeah, and that was like you guys were saying, they played hard. They almost won some games they very much should not have, and
they won some games. I mean, I don't know. Maybe to me, it's a bigger thing. Even though the Packers were down, winning in Lambeau is hard to do.
Absolutely,
with Aaron Rodgers under center, it's hard to do. So.
Yeah, and he definitely got a raw deal. The good news for him is that he's still getting paid, still getting his money.
His guaranteed contract. He's got to love it.
And I can imagine that he will get a job somewhere else in the NFL. Like, this isn't going to be the be-all, end-all for him.
I do hope that is not the last time he ever has a chance. Couple more quickly we wrap up and get into the picks. Matt LaFleur probably has the toughest job of them all because he basically has an established quarterback who many believe, whether you disagree or agree, many believe is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. And not much else really in that situation. I mean, you have Devontae Adams, who's fine. You have maybe a potentially all-pro running back in Aaron Jones if he gets a full season. Other than that, there's not much. So, I mean, we're sitting here saying that Matt LaFleur, okay, great, you can make Aaron Rodgers, and the offense more dynamic, but I don't know if the offense is really the issue here. And I'm not saying they needed to go out and hire a defensive coach, but we were talking about, you and I, Tony, we're talking about this is probably Aaron Rodgers' last head coach of his career, and I don't think they really solved anything on the defensive front. Now, again, they kept Mike Pettin, who was the defensive coordinator. Maybe it'll work out, maybe it won't, but I think we're talking about we need to add bodies and players and quality players, and the tough thing to do is always to get free agents to come to Green Bay. So my point being is he's got a long road ahead of him, but a lot of people I felt when they were, especially a lot of the talking heads, I felt when they were discussing this, they thought it was a fantastic hire. And I'm not saying it won't be, but I just don't think they're better today than they were yesterday.
Yeah, to me it's a bit of a strange situation because if this is going to be the last coach of Aaron Rodgers' career, I have to imagine he actually had some say in this.
Oh, no doubt.
So
wouldn't shock me if he was even in the building when these guys were
talked about
interviewed.
that the previous time. I agree. Yeah.
So this has to be the kind of thing where Aaron Rodgers says, "This is the guy I feel comfortable with. Get me on the field with him. Get me on the field with his game plan, and let him work." And Rodgers is going to live or die by this guy at this point. So.
I mean, are we in a situation where, okay, so the offense got better, so they average 25 points a game instead of 23 points a game. Okay, but the defense still gives up 28.
Right, and the problem that Green Bay is going to face is that, you're right, they have to get better, not just because they should be a better football team, but because that division constantly gets better. We've seen the Browns getting better. Not the Browns, the Bears. Same rough color scheme.
Same B.
Minnesota was unbelievable last year. Lull this year, but I think they can get back at it next year.
Their expectations are high.
Yeah, and even Detroit with Matt Patricia, they're trying to retool that team. It wouldn't surprise me if we see a big uptick from them next year as well. So I think that Green Bay has to get better because they have to be better in that division in order to be able to compete, because otherwise they're going to get buried by Chicago and possibly Minnesota next year too.
Yeah, and they're going to be fighting with Detroit for the doormat of the division.
Right. Again.
Yeah. So, all right. And the last hire that we've had so far is Bruce Arians, which I already said was my favorite hiring. I think going in, getting an established offensive mind, which is the crazy thing. They still got an offensive guy to work with, Jameis Winston. But we have a track record with Bruce Arians, and they got a 2-for-1 with Todd Bowles, who was Bruce Arians' coordinator in Arizona when their defense was phenomenal. So a lot of optimism in Tampa Bay here. The question will be is over the next 8 months, how fast can Bruce Arians work and improve Jameis Winston?
Hopefully for Tampa Bay fans quickly, but I think that this is going to be a true test because when he was in Arizona, as the coach there, he had established quarterbacks, he had established receivers that he could rely on. Jameis Winston has been so up and down. He makes boneheaded plays. He makes mistakes. He doesn't read the defenses as well as some of the other quarterbacks do. I wonder if Arians is going to be able to get through to this guy, or if he's going to have to, sort of abandon ship, so to speak, and get rid of Winston and kind of move on from him at this point.
Well, that's what we talked about. Okay, Arians of the three most important positions on the team, GM, coach, and quarterback, Arians has the most job security right now. I would imagine if things don't go well or an improvement to the Glazers' liking, Jason lights out, and Jameis Winston's contract is not getting renewed. So Bruce Arians really has two options. I would imagine he's not going to try and go out and tank his first season because he's not going to. Again, unless things go horribly wrong, this guy's not getting fired. But at the same time, if he goes 8 months going into the start of the season, he's just like, Jameis Winston is just not getting it for some reason, or whatever. Jameis Winston just doesn't improve. What do you do in that spot, No,
I think that's exactly it. And my guess is, Bruce is such a strong offensive mind, and he's probably already thought about the options that they even have, going into this season. I'm not sure where he stands, on any of that. But
they could probably bring Fitzpatrick back, I would imagine, too.
Sure. My guess is he's probably a fan of doing that, or he's for some reason not a fan of doing that. Whatever the case is, Bruce is pretty strong, strongly opinionated guy, and he's been right very, very often on the offensive side of the ball, especially with quarterbacks. And we've mentioned they have a really, really good receiver core. They've got a fantastic young tight end, an offensive line that was better, at least early in the season. They were better than they had been last year. So I just feel like this team is really, really close to becoming a very strong team in that division, which is a competitive, tough division, no question. But to me, this hire is by far although I think there were a lot of poor hires this year, I think this one is by far the best one, and makes just a ton of sense all the way around.
Fair enough.
I still am very upset that McDaniels is staying a Patriot, but yeah,
I gotta imagine he's the coach away. So your two biggest candidates don't have jobs, McCarthy and McDaniels. And biggest, I mean the most recognizable with the NFL pedigree. Obviously Cliff Kingsbury is a name as well. But the two biggest candidates that were expected to get jobs, one will maybe take Arians' place in the broadcast booth, and the other goes back to New England.
Gross.
So of course everybody, now McCarthy's saying he only wanted the Jets job, which is interesting to me because if you had McCarthy or Gase, I think 6-1.
Yeah, no, I think they're both really good options, especially for that situation. I think a lot of coaches wanted to go to the Jets, as we talked about, for that spot, and knowing that New England might be in some transition as well, and being in that spot, New York, of course, is a place to be known and recognized, and to you can win a Super Bowl with a team like the Jets. Again, you're there, you're legendary. A spot like that. So I think
he ain't done it in going on 50 years now.
Since
1962, I think it was. Was it 62?
Drunk ass Joe Namath. Yeah, something like that.
I could kiss you. Tell you what, whoever wins the Super Bowl with the Jets, Joe Namath could kiss you.
He will, and he will
if he's still alive.
Who knows?
All right, so it is that time. We're going to make our picks for the Saturday games. You guys ready? I know that your token's proxy, so you have to do.
Tokens picks, yeah.
You wouldn't say what you're told. But this prop bet's a little different for the playoffs than it was for our regular season. And as soon as Spike stops spinning around in his chair.
This is my version of exercise, spinning in an office chair.
Yeah.
All right. Well, whenever you're ready, Spike.
Let's go.
Why don't you give the listeners a little insight on how our playoff prop bet is going to go, or is going?
So, unlike for those of you that listened during the regular season, we modified the rules for this a little bit. We are picking every game in the playoffs against the spread and against the total. We're not taking money lines at all. The points will increase as the rounds go on. So this week, the divisional round, we are looking at 2 points per pick. Right now, as we sit, I'm in last place with 3 points. Aaron has 4 points. And son of a bitch who couldn't bother to be here has 7 points.
2 weeks in a row he's missed class.
And I sort of feel like, well, actually I shouldn't say that. I was going to say, I feel like the fact that he isn't here should invalidate his picks for this week, but I don't think I'm going to be here next week. So I can't say that we should invalidate his picks for not being here if I'm not going to be here.
Those are important ones too, because they'll be worth more next week, right?
Exactly, yeah. Mm-hmm. But there are more games this week, so more things to pick. So it's kind of balancing out.
All right, so Proxy, do you have Token Tony's picks?
I do. I am prepared and ready to go.
All right, so with that being said, without further ado, we are going to start with the first game. I would say it's the game where the most people, I would say the most belief, well, maybe not with the Chargers, but I'd say, just for purposes of me saying this, the game with the most belief in the underdog from people. And that's Indianapolis and Kansas City. It's the 1 o'clock Eastern, 1:30 Eastern, or no, 1:30 Pacific. Excuse me, 1:30.
Dude.
Time zones are hard for me. I don't know. You missed. In college, they were really hard. Like in our college picks, I had many problems with the time zones.
Wow.
It was very rough, actually. Like, you think this is bad? In the college time, it was like,
Really?
is this the 9 a.m. start or the noon?
Where are those volume levels on your
East Coast? That's basically
Fuck the East Coast bias, yeah. The 1:35 p.m. Pacific start times. How about that? There we go. I got it.
Good.
Nailed it. All right, Indianapolis at Kansas City from Arrowhead. Kansas City coming in. A lot of people have doubts about them and how they can emerge as a playoff or Super Bowl contender with a defense that is as porous as it is, especially with an offense coming in with Captain Andrew Luck and sending the troops into battle with Marlon Mack, T.Y. Hilton, Eric Ebron. I mean, it seems like they've got a stable, no pun intended, of Warriors. And the line currently is Kansas City -5.
Yep.
The total is 56.5. Again, we use our numbers are provided by covers.com. So just if you want to follow along, this is what they are at the time of when we record.
Oh my God, dude!
English is hard today, and math.
English and time zones and math and making good picks. I mean, you are all over the place.
Making good picks. Wait before you wait to hear my picks before you bash them.
I don't need
because I believe what place are you in?
You know what?
Yeah,
that's
go eat a bag
at this point.
All right, so Kansas City -5. The total is 56.5. Last place, honors to the loser.
No, honors to the winner so I can fade your asses.
Okay, fine. Honors to golfer 1, which is Token Tony.
Well, this is an easy one to back here. We are starting out with Indy getting the 5 points, and this is just riding the hot hand. Won, 11 of the last 12, I believe, games, which is really remarkable when you think about it.
I think 10 of the last 11.
Is it 10, 11? Okay.
Yeah.
10 of the last 11, and just rolling strong here. So that's an easy one, I think, with Token Tony backing Indy. We're hopefully in this case we don't see much of a drop off here, and I think you brought up Marlon Mack as well. He becomes really a main piece of this team going forward, and against a really subpar rush defense. I think we look for Marlon Mack to have another hopefully 100+ yard game, and that'll give India a decent chance to maybe even win this one.
Yeah, I obviously, I've already made it, pretty aware that, I have futures tickets on the Colts, and I've already put in a little bit of a hedge bet. If the Chiefs win, I'm going to make a little bit of money, but nothing obviously like I would if the Colts go on and win the Super Bowl. This being said, I really feel this is going to be the first where we kind of almost start believing in Kansas City again. I think they're going to silence a little bit. I think the defense will still be kind of the question mark, and we'll talk about that in the total. But I think Kansas City's going to cover the 5. I see this as a 7 to 10 point game, close throughout, but I see a late score pushing that over, either a late score pushing it over the 5, or them staying kind of with that arm's distance just enough to keep it above the spread. I see a barn burner here with Kansas City, just, like I said, either getting that last second cover or just kind of keeping it, just kind of at arm's distance for the entire game. Kansas City -5.
Christ. I was hoping that you'd take Indy so I could take Kansas City without questioning it, but I've been going back and forth more and more.
You got to catch me, but we got to catch Token too.
I understand that.
Do you know?
This is a spot where I'm not super happy with the pick. If this were a regular season bet, I would be using this as my blind bet because I don't feel confident in this. I like the way that Indianapolis has been playing more and more. You're right, they did win 10 out of the last 11, but that one loss was a shutout, which doesn't fill me with a ton of confidence. I know it was against Jacksonville, Jacksonville's defense, blah, 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 but it doesn't fill me with a lot of confidence. That said, I think that Kansas City, when these two get in a shootout, Indianapolis just will not be able to keep up with Kansas City. I think Kansas City can pull it out. I think they win pretty easily. I think they cover the 5. I'll take the Kansas City minus the 5.
There you go.
Not happy about it, but I will.
All right, and now it's total time.
Moving on to the total. This is the one that I severely disagree with Token on, but Token is, we are on the over 50, are we going with 56, is that right?
56 and a half.
56 and a half. So over 56 and a half. And again, I think just mirroring based on the spread, my guess is Token is just feeling this is a back and forth, pretty much shootout type of game. Kind of whoever has the ball last sort of deal wins it, and that's where he's at here. And so we have over 56 and a half, although I'm certainly against this one with a wager as well. So.
Oh, with a wager. Proxy fade.
This is the only bet I actually have as a straight wager.
Well, then you're fading me as well. I'm actually over the total as well.
Wow.
I actually think this is going to finish in the 35-28, 34-27. Like I said, they're going to keep it just within that touchdown to maybe even 10-point distance. And, I mean, they just got so many weapons. I mean, I know I talked about all of what Indianapolis has. I mean, there's just so many weapons on this field for both teams. Even with Kareem Hunt out, Damian Williams has stepped in and been not quite Kareem Hunt status, but I mean, he's been definitely an admirable, serviceable backup. And I think the best thing that could have happened to this offense for a running game and short catch purposes is that Spencer Ware got hurt because he was really providing nothing for them. And I don't know if they would have forced Spencer Ware just because of what he did before Kareem Hunt existed. But Damian Williams has been kind of a breath of fresh air for Andy Reid's offense. And I mean, do we have to go down the line? Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Sammy Watkins, and they've got a cannon for an arm in Pat Mahomes, which if we ask Cliff Kingsbury, he knows the deal, right?
For sure.
So I'm taking the over 56.5.
It's kind of amazing that Token went over in this spot because when we previewed this line last week, it opened at 56 or 57, whatever it was.
He said the under.
One of the under.
And I said this line looks low, and he said it looks high.
Yep.
And that made me scratch my head. I actually agree with what Aaron was just saying about the fact that Williams replacing Hunt is such a good thing for Kansas City. But the more I look at this game, I think if this becomes a battle between Mack and Williams, that the quarterbacks aren't going to be out there long enough. They're not going to be gunslinging like everybody thinks that they're going to be. This game could stay under, and I think I'm taking the under 56.5 in this spot. I think I'm fading my initial pick from last week.
Fair enough.
The way too early line,
just like Token did.
Yeah,
and I don't. The only way I really see an under in this spot is a blowout, and I as much as
like a 41-10 type game.
As much as Indianapolis is playing well, I don't see them blowing out Kansas City at home, but I can see Kansas City blowing out Indianapolis in a spot where the defense has half a life, and I mean we know the offense. So
yeah, and for the people following along, it's 56% of the money has come in on Indianapolis in this spot,
+5, yeah.
Plus the 5, yeah.
All right, so let's move on to Dallas at the Rams. That is the late game on Saturday night. Current action is LA -7, LA Rams, that is. And the total is 49. Like you said, 57% of the action coming in on the dog, Dallas, +7. We've got 13-3. We talked about Sean McVay on the last podcast. If he can't get it done in this with 2 straight home playoff games, and again, we talked about Atlanta really kind of just crushing them, even though the score was a little different. I went back and looked at the score. It was a little closer, but statistically they just dominated them. And if they get another team, to come into their building and beat them like Atlanta did, I think you have to start looking at all these coaches who went with the Sean McVay process, starting to maybe go, oh crap, whoops, what did we do? But nevertheless, I think an underrated situation here is the fact that Dallas training camp was in California I believe it still might be. For so long it's been there. I think that this may not be as much of a home game for the Rams as, obviously as the sheet says. It's in L.A., but I think the contingent of Dallas Cowboy fans may be able to almost 50-50 the stadium here in this spot. But nevertheless, honors to Proxy here. The Rams are a 7-point favorite.
And the Proxy and Big Token, we are aligned on the same in this one. Both on the Rams here, laying 7 points. This one, to me, I think I've said this just from my own personal belief. I don't think the 1 or 2 seed in the NFC can lose to anybody at home, and this is just I think a good matchup for the Rams. We've heard a lot of good things about Melvin Gordon being actually very legitimately healthy, not even on the injury report this week. A couple of reports came in he could have played last week if they needed to, things like that. So Melvin Gordon.
He plays for the Chargers.
Oh,
you mean Gurley?
Yeah, Gurley. I'm sorry.
Okay. It's for a second there. I was
my
like,
bad. No, that was.
I was listening. I swear, but hold on a second.
I wrote my running back confused. No, I'm sorry. Todd Gurley, not even being on the injury report, and I.
All y'all running backs look alike.
So that's pretty much where we're at here. I think we saw LA really get it together on offense the last couple of weeks. I know they were against more rougher teams, but still averaging about 40 points a game over the last 2 weeks. I think they're back to what we saw earlier in the year when they reeled off their first 8 in a row, and really like the Rams here in this one, laying the 7 points.
All right, I will go with Dallas here, and like I said, I think the home field advantage being gone or virtually gone is going to matter, and I'm putting my eggs in Zeke and Dak, and that may not be the right move, but my name is Aaron, and I make bad decisions.
That is true, which is why I'm taking the Rams minus the 7. I think the Cowboys stink away from Dallas. I don't think they can play outside of that arena. So I think the Rams can win this. I think they can win it in a blowout. If this were the regular season contest,
give them Rams by whatever.
I would say Rams by whatever, but I'm not doing it. I'm keeping a little conservative this time.
All right, total.
Over 49 or 49.5, whatever.
We got 49 here.
49, okay. Over 49 here. So I think just a Rams route is where we're at over here. So something in the high 30s variety to whatever 20 or something like that, and we'll take the Rams. The Rams big.
I actually like the over as well in this game. I think it's going to be both teams right around the 27 to 30 range, and again I think it's going to be a close game. And I'm going to say Greg the Leg pushes it over the total.
I don't think Dallas scores more than 10. Give me the under.
Dallas scores a ton.
Dallas scores a ton, meaning 10. No, I think that Dallas falls apart in this game. Wow. And the Cowboys have lost, going back however long, they've lost their last 4 road playoff games. I don't think they have the stomach. I don't think they have the weapons. I think the Rams run them out of the stadium. Give me the under.
The only thing that scares me is I feel like with a porous Rams defense, if Zeke gets his, that could help the total stay under as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not saying that there won't be scoring, but clock control and clock management, and when you put LA in a situation where they have to run, it takes Gurley, have to pass. It takes Gurley's ability away, and I mean they do have a lot of weapons, but we talked about it, last podcast. Cooper Kupp has been problematic. His injury has been problematic and a big loss for them too. So, all right, that's our picks. We picked both games on Saturday. Tomorrow on 12 Ounce Sports Radio, we are going to have our Sunday picks as well. It's Los Angeles, the Chargers version versus the New England Patriots, and Philadelphia is traveling to the Superdome to face New Orleans to hopefully, if they can, avenge a 48-7 loss earlier in the season. But Drew Brees probably has other things on his mind, most notably getting to the NFC title game. All right, well, we appreciate Spike and Proxy Tony coming in. And
Broken Tony.
That's right, Broken Tony, this podcast. Obviously, we appreciate the Proxy coming in and making picks for Token because he slept in this recording. So, actually, since I didn't do it in the beginning, let's thank the sponsors: VGK Pop Sockets, ChaiPoker.com, Vegas Puckline Apparel.
Wait, what?
We got a new one. Yeah, you weren't here. See what happened? You don't show up. Vegas Puckline Apparel, Eric on the Web Productions, and of course our most important sponsor, which is 12 Ounce Sports Radio, for airing us every Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Thursday evenings. So again, for Spike, for Broken Tony, I am Aaron. We appreciate you listening. We'll catch you on the next podcast.